We have lots to talk about today, including the potential for a three-way blockbuster trade in the offseason involving possibly the Carolina Hurricanes, Winnipeg Jets, and the Ottawa Senators. All three teams have impact players that are likely going to move. We could all benefit from each other, kind of swapping players here. We'll take a look at how that could work and help each club. Plus, we have news around the NHL, including the Stanley Cup playoffs. More teams have been eliminated. We have a huge Game 6 tonight between Vancouver and Edmonton. Plus, we have other news around the NHL involving the Vancouver Canucks and the latest on the Columbus GM Search. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. Let's start with the latest happenings around the 2024 Stanley Cup playoffs. We had a couple of big Game 6s last night, and both have resulted in the series being over and two more teams being eliminated. We're now down to 5 teams left standing here in the 2024 Stanley Cup playoffs. We had the early game Boston against Florida. The Bruins trying to survive and forced a Game 7. It was looking pretty good for the Boston Bruins, I must say. They had played really up until late in the third, things were going pretty well. I mean, no team really dominated the other per se. It was a pretty tight game. I spent a lot of time tied, and unfortunately late in the game, I think it was under 2 minutes left. I can't remember the exact time on the clock, but I remember being stunned when it happened. Florida defenseman Gustav Forsling scores unexpectedly. It was kind of a weird play. Swayman would probably like to have it back, but at the same time, I don't really think you can fault him. Forsling probably should have never really theoretically been open to get the shot off, and it was kind of a weird scenario, but and very much a underrated player in Forsling, who's been a real rock for Florida since they picked him up a couple of years ago, comes through absolutely clutch late in the game. Boston put their last minute push on, the goalie out, trying to get it tied up, but were unsuccessful, and that brought an end to their season. The Florida Panthers will move on to play the New York Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final, which is scheduled to get underway in New York on Wednesday. The other game, of course, saw the Dallas Stars doing battle with the Colorado Avalanche. Again, tightly contested game, pretty evenly matched for the most part. Goaltenders playing well. Ended up going to overtime in a 1-1 tie. Dallas thought they had won the game earlier in overtime before the actual winner ended up being scored. It was a case where the goal was called off due to goalie interference. Marchment believed that he had scored the winning goal. It was actually Matt Duchene who ended up scoring the winner, who was the one who was considered guilty of goalie interference. Basically, the way they explained it was, even though Duchene's skates were not in the crease, the way he was with his backside and his butt was in the crease, and after the slight bump from the Avalanche defenseman, he kind of goes in, makes contact with the goalie, but you could kind of say that he was pushed in. But once you're in there on your own accord, it's usually resulting in interference, and that's how much of a final. It was kind of weird. To be honest, I'm shocked that it didn't count. I'm also, like Mason Marchment said, he just thinks they didn't want to see the series end on a controversial goal. I just felt bad for Dallas at the time, and I was like, if they don't win this game, there's going to be outrage, because really, that should have counted. I'm shocked that it didn't. I understand, though, that, like I said, if you go into blue paint on your own, it's oftentimes doesn't really matter what comes next. If there's goalie contact and they're not able to make the save, generally it is called goalie interference. And I just didn't see Duchene as being in the crease. So it was kind of weird for them to, and then it wasn't really explained that way, of course, but initially by the referees. We only kind of heard this, after the fact. That's what Marchment himself was explained by the referees when his goal was called off. So, later on, Matt Duchene does score the game-winning goal in double overtime to put out his former club, the Avalanche, where he started his career, and the Dallas Stars are moving on. Certainly, Colorado a bit depleted without Valeri Nichushkin. They still have kind of failed to replace Gabriel Landeskog, and he's still with the team. Hasn't played in 2 years. He's still trying to come back. There's still optimism. There's still hope. Jared Bednar said he wasn't really super close to getting back in, but they're optimistic at this point for next year. And it's just holy jumping. It's this team is really good, but they just were not able to sustain that loss. That was huge for them. So at the end of the day, Alexander Georgiev, who was kind of looked upon as being the weak link for the most part, played pretty good. Outside of a shaky start to the playoffs, I thought he was pretty solid for them and gave them a chance to win most nights. Obviously a few blips in there, but at the end of the day, it's going to be curious to see how Colorado reacts to this. That's a couple of years now since winning the Stanley Cup, where they haven't made it out of the second round. Last year they were out in the first round. How much surgeries are going to be to this roster. Mikko Rantanen's due for an extension. Makar, you get McKinnon. What's the status of Nichushkin? He can't return till at least November. So at this point, do they even want him? They can't terminate his contract. It's going to get complicated. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit more change in Colorado than we may have like last year, just given it's been a few years now since the Cup. And, well, clearly they've, can't get over the hump. And they're going to have to make some hard decisions. Like, obviously, Nichushkin and Landeskog, completely different places in their careers. But they need to find a way, I think, to be able to move on in a sense and have a more permanent replacement. If Landeskog can go next year, that's great. But it's just tough to say how that's going to go. So we'll see. The Avalanche, unfortunately, out for the second year in a row, earlier than they wanted. Of course, a huge Game 6 tonight between Edmonton and Vancouver. The Oilers are going back to Stuart Skinner. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised. I thought Calvin Pickard's played really well the last two games. He's certainly not the reason why they lost the last one. They're 1-1 with Pickard in the lineup, and he gave them a chance to win, only gave up a couple goals. It was tight games. And like I said, in my opinion, they lost the last game because their star players were not able to score. That was the reason why they lost. 5-on-5, they just were not good enough. The power play, not good enough. Their power play has been absolutely just running through teams. And last game, couldn't get it going. Star players couldn't produce. Both their goals they scored were depth goals between Evander Kane and Matthias Janmark, which is great to see. They finally got some of that, which they needed. But I'm surprised they're going back to Skinner. I really am. And I hope for their sake that he comes back and plays really well. He has played really well after a loss. He has a really good record. And I'm not sure if that still kind of counts or not, because he hasn't gone back in the net after a loss. He's had an extended break given the last two games that he's been out. But the season's on the line, and it's make or break for Skinner. If he has a bad game, I think he's going to have a short leash, for one. And secondly, it could be his end of his career in Edmonton. I just don't know that they're going to want to rely on him anymore. Like, they just can't. They still have Jack Campbell under contract in the minors. They need to find themselves like a more solid number one goalie if this team is going to win. And time is running out during the McDavid-Draisaitl era. So they need to make some hard decisions and kind of go and see what happens here. But Vancouver, on the other hand, has been played well. We will see if they can end the series tonight or if Edmonton can force Game 7, which I believe would be on Monday night. So that's your playoff updates. We did get an update as well from Team USA for the 2025 Four Nation Face-Off tournament that's going to be taking place. Team USA has named their head coach, which will be Penn's bench boss, Mike Sullivan. No huge surprise there. Sullivan's a longtime NHL coach, one of the highest tenured coaches around the NHL. Of course, has plenty of experience when it comes to dealing with star players and working in this kind of environment. So certainly not surprised at all that he is the selection. So Sullivan will be their coach, and then I would suspect he'll be in the running to be the coach for the Olympic team coming the year after that. Of course, like I said, Carolina, it's been a couple of days now since they've been eliminated, but lots of talk about the Hurricanes. What's the future of Rod Brind'Amour? And they've got a slew of players that are needing new contracts, and they're not all going to be back. Rod Brind'Amour and Don Waddell, though, are expected to speak together later this week. Don't know the exact date and time yet, but we do know they're talking together. So that gives me some encouraging signs that they'll get his contract worked out. I honestly think it would be a massive mistake to let him go, and I also think it's a massive question mark as to why this is not done and why between rounds things were leaked out about the status of his contract. Like, in all honesty, to me, that was probably a bit of a distraction that the team did not need. I'm not saying that's why they lost, but I don't think it helped matters. And, why is it that this team, as much as they've been really good for the past, whatever it's been now, 5-6 years, spending a lot of time winning playoff series, making it second, third round, they can't get over the hump. But as much as they've had success, they get there. At one point, they were considered a potential team to be relocated. Tom Dundon comes in, buys the team starts doing better, they get better attendance, everything kind of fixed itself, so to speak, and they became a more solid franchise. But as much as he helped with that, he is notoriously kind of cheap. And, we'll see how things work out with all of these contracts, including his head coach, who's been so good and arguably the top guy, top 1 or 2, 3 coaches in the NHL. So we'll see what happens. But the fact that they're speaking together later in the week does give us some encouraging signs that they'll get it sorted out and get the contract done. Lots of player movement, don't expect it within this roster. Been a long stretch now with not the same roster because there have been some changes, but nothing too crazy. You've got an extended time now where they're likely going to try to keep Jake Gensel. They changed their business model essentially because they were never a team that was in the rental business. After what they spent to get Gensel, I suspect that they do want to keep him. So he'll be a top priority. Getting Seth Jarvis extended, it's going to be a top priority. That's going to create guys like Marty Necas is pretty much a given to be moved. There's been even articles saying that he wants to be moved. And I think it might have been his father, if I'm not mistaken, talking to a European news outlet. But he wants a bigger role. He wants to be on the first power play. He just wants to grow his game and doesn't think he can do that in Carolina. I mean, some guys like Jarvis, for example, have passed him on the depth chart and getting the top line minutes, the top line power play and all that. So Necas is pretty much a goner via trade. A lot of their D are UFA, whether it be Chatfield, Pesce, Shea. They're probably not all going to come back. Elliot Friedman said he doesn't expect Brett Pesce back because they've already been negotiating a long time and have had a hard time coming to an agreement of any sort. So there's all the turnover there. Then you've got Teravainen and Martinook and other forwards that are due. There's speculation about a Jesperi Kotkaniemi buyout where he's still young enough to be a 1/3 buyout. Lots of activity going to be in Carolina. They are going to be a very interesting team to watch here after the fallout of another earlier than expected playoff exit for those Hurricanes. Of course, Zach Parise with the Avalanche as well played his last career NHL game last night. He did confirm he would be retiring after the season, and based on his post-game chats with the media, certainly doesn't sound like there's any change of heart there. So Zach Parise will likely officially announce his retirement sometime coming up. So he's had a great career, failed to get that Stanley Cup, but certainly has had a good run and certainly played well in the NHL for a long time. A couple of UFA speculations as well. Vancouver, we know they're having a great playoff right now, and because of the playoff performance of guys like Lindholm and Zadorov, it's expected and reported on here by Frank Saravalli that he expects them to have a difficult time retaining either one as UFAs. Not that there's not interest from the team, and there certainly would be interest on the player to some degree to stay, especially on Zadorov's side, but it's going to be really challenging. Frank Saravalli was saying that Zadorov likely thinks now, because of his strong playoff play, that he can get a 6x6 kind of contract. And there's just no way Vancouver can do that. And really, if you think about it, on a lot of teams, he's still a 5-6 defenseman. He's not going to be a top pair D. He's not going to be a second pair D on very many teams. So like a lot of teams, he's a third pair guy. But he's certainly playing really, really good lately, especially in the battles with Evander Kane. In this series with the Oilers, he's been really good. He's got a couple of big goals too on top of that. Like, there's lots to like about his game. He's been a good fit there. But for him to stay in Vancouver, there's no way he's getting $6 million. Would he get overpaid on the free agent market for that? I don't know. I mean, I still see him maybe being I'm not sure what his number would be. Maybe 4.5. I really don't know. It's tough to say, but he's not getting 6. Lindholm, on the other hand, it wasn't looking like they were even going to keep him. Because they made that trade a little bit earlier. They were going to flip him at the deadline. Things weren't working out. I know he was dealing with an injury, and then the playoffs came around, and now this is the Lindholm that we've expected to see. He's done a really nice job in both of their series so far. So again, that's going to bring his value back up to what it was expected to be. Not that there's not interest, and I'm not saying for sure it's not going to happen on either player, but given their strong performances, it is going to be challenging for them to be able to pay them appropriately to keep them, that they're going to be able to get a lot more on the open market. I would suspect a prime target for Lindholm very well could be Boston if he does indeed end up leaving the Canucks via free agency. In Columbus, we've talked about some of the names in the open GM role there. We've heard about Marc Bergevin. We've heard about Ken Holland. Another name not to forget about is Mark Hunter. Formerly of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's worked with the London Knights, of course, for a long time. He's got long aspirations to be an NHL general manager. The Columbus Blue Jackets do have a lot of connections to that London team, including Rick Nash, of course, who has a big role. He's not going to be GM, but he works in the front office. Will be likely an assistant GM to the incoming new person in that role. Of course, came from that organization, knows them very well. And it's widely expected that he's going to be in the mix. Now, do the Jackets want an up-and-coming? Mark Hunter he's not new to hockey. He'd be new to the role at that level. But would they really look at him the same way given his vast amount of hockey experience? I'm not sure. But it was, kind of speculated that John Davidson and the Blue Jackets might want a more experienced GM. But, obviously they've had an opportunity to hire Bergevin. That hasn't happened. Now, Holland and the Oilers, their season's not over yet, so they can't really speak to him officially. So I don't know how that's going to go. But just keep in mind of Mark Hunter. He was one of the first names that came up when Jarmo Kekalainen was first let go. Now, they're still technically playing hockey, too. Of course, they won the OHL championship, and they're heading for the Memorial Cup. So, a lot of these conversations I don't think are going to happen until some of this stuff is done. So, to me, the longer... Now, for example, if the Oilers are eliminated tonight or in Game 7, like in the next couple of days, and then we get another week or so goes by and there's no word about Holland joining the team, and the longer it goes, I'm going to say it's probably not him and that maybe they are waiting for Mark Hunter. That's just kind of speculation on my part. When Mark Hunter's name first came, I heard Elliot Friedman mention him as a potential candidate just as soon as Kekalainen was let go. That was some time ago now. So we'll see. But don't forget about him. To me, he makes a ton of sense for that club. Now, as I mentioned, could we see a 3-team blockbuster type trade in the offseason? To me, I've seen this mentioned on social media. All 3 of these players have been linked to trade rumors by various NHL insiders. There's no surprise to hear the name of Marty Necas, Jacob Chychrun, or Nikolai Ehlers all mentioned in the rumor mill. They've all come up through various reports that I've talked about here on the channel from a variety of NHL connected insiders that, it's widely known all 3 of these players are extremely likely to be dealt sometime over the offseason. The closer we get to the NHL draft, that's usually a period of peak activity. Then there's sometimes a good amount of trades that happen, early in the free agency period as well. The stuff that doesn't materialize at the draft sometimes comes together a little bit afterwards. But at the end of the day, if you take a look at all these players, they're all players that need new contracts. Now, Nikolai Ehlers and Jacob Chychrun both have 1 year left on their existing deals, and they're scheduled to be unrestricted free agents. Marty Necas is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights as of right now. We know all 3 of these guys, it's a very high percentage that they will not be back with their existing clubs. Chychrun probably being the most likely. I don't know that Steve Staios is going to rush out there and pull the trigger. He does have a year left, and they can take some more time to figure this out if they need to. They do like Chychrun. I think it's more about changing the composition of their D. And they've already got Shabbat and Sanderson on the left side. Long-term money, big money. It's not that they don't like them. It's just changing that dynamic back there, changing the construction of the blue line, and getting maybe a preferred right shot D. I don't know what their odds will be, but there was reports they're very, very interested in Chris Tanev. But like I said, there's going to be a long list of teams interested in him there. You could throw Brett Pesce into that mix too, assuming he makes it to UFA status. Again, they're not going to be the only ones, and they're going to have lots of teams to compete with to try to land one of those guys. But at the end of the day, It's believed that that's kind of the general consensus of what they're expected to do. So you take Nikolai Ehlers, not happy in Winnipeg, needing a fresh start, consistent, usually around that 25 plus goal mark. Like I said, plays with a ton of pace, ton of speed. There is some talk and speculation that Ottawa might consider trading Matthew Joseph as well this offseason. Not to say that he'd be included here, but the one thing they would miss would be his speed. The one thing they won't miss is his inconsistency with his production. Now, Joseph, though, at the same time, is a very utility type player. When he was putting up most of his points, he was getting top 6 time. When he put on the third line, it wasn't really happening. If the Sens take more of the approach, and we'll have to see how Travis Green wants to do things, of kind of working more with duos instead of lines, of having your 3 best players all in your top line and kind of spreading the offense out more, you could see Joseph in a consistent top 6 spot. If you have between your wingers, like, if you'd have one of your solid, if you took your top 3 wingers, let's say you got Tkachuk, Batherson and Giroux, for example, and you put one of them on each line or something, just kind of spread things out, Joseph could play a top 6 role if he's playing with 2 other stronger offensive players. He'll put up points in that way, but if he's going to be a third line player, he's not going to thrive. And if they move him, they're going to really be missing that speed. So that's where Ehlers could come in. But at the same time, to add another element of speed to their top 6 would be important anyway. I mean, Timmy Stützle, great skater. Brady Tkachuk, good skater, but, not the fastest. Drake Batherson's got pretty good speed, but not known as a super speedster, right? So to add some more speed so that those top 2 lines could play with more pace would be a great addition. Absolutely would. He's got some experience. He's got some playoff games. There's lots to like about Ehlers' game. So to me, he could be a great fit there in Ottawa. But of course, they've had too many issues of players coming over with 1 year left and not staying. There would absolutely have to be a contract extension as part of that. Or I'd be reluctant from Steve Stale's perspective to pull the trigger. Going back to Winnipeg, they'd get Marty Necas from Carolina. They get to get a little bit younger. They get a right shot top forward who can play in the top 2 lines, who can contribute on your power play. He's looking for more of an opportunity. Winnipeg would be a prime spot to do that. He could be a great fit. Maybe put him with Scheifele and Connor, for example. That could be an option. You take Ehlers out of that top 6, well, Necas can certainly come right in, give them a different look. He shoots right instead of left, plays a little bit different style of game. Good speed, though. There's lots to like there. And then at the same time, Carolina, who has a ton of defensemen on expiring contracts with a lot of uncertainty in their blue line right now. Like I said, you've got Pesce, Shea, Chatfield, all unrestricted. The odds of them keeping all 3 are probably pretty slim. You get Brent Burns, that's only down to 1 year left. He's not going to be there much longer. You got Jacob Slavin, who he needs. I believe he's due for an extension as well. Arguably their best defenseman overall, and Orlov is there. So, you've only got a couple of guys really committed for the next couple of years. Add a guy like Chychrun, you can take your pick of your UFAs who you don't bother negotiating with. And then you got a good D to come in who's in his mid-20s, good contract, and give you that offensive output that you're going to be missing from like a Brady Shea, for example. So to me, that makes a ton of sense for Carolina. It makes a ton of sense for Ottawa. Makes a ton of sense for Winnipeg. Now, you could also change it up. You could do this 3-way deal in 2 ways, in my opinion. You could set it up so that Necas goes to the Senators and Chychrun goes to Winnipeg, and Ehlers goes to the Hurricanes. And that could work as well, because like Carolina, the Winnipeg Jets, they also have a bit of influx on their blue line. We don't know what's happening with Brendan Dillon, Dylan DeMello. They're both unrestricted. They haven't really been pleased with Nate Schmidt. I'm not sure if he'll be back. I think they would like to move Neil Pionk if they're able to as well. There's going to be, I think, some fairly good turnover on that Winnipeg blue line. And to bring in a guy like Chychrun, who kind of meets their age group, meets the offensive output, to play in a second line or second pair D role behind Josh Morrissey on the left side, to me would be a great option for them. If they can get Chychrun for Ehlers, essentially, Necas goes to Ottawa and Ehlers to Carolina. I mean, Necas could really solidify their top 6 as well. You got to remember, right now their top 2 lines on the right side, you got Batherson and Giroux. Giroux's not going to be there forever. He's getting up there in years. I'm sure they'd like to extend him another year or two. He's entering the last year of his contract. But again, it would allow you to spread that offense out a little bit more as well. So certainly to me, and a lot of the other guys outside of Giroux, looking at Brady Tkachuk, Shane Pinto, Drake Batherson, Timmy Stützle, Necas could be a great fit to grow with those guys and to continue into the next part of his career. So again, I think you could go this three-way deal in completely different ways and have it still make complete sense and have it work for all three teams. So this is something I would not be shocked about. I mean, I've heard of rumors about Chychrun being moved for either of these guys. I think that they're both players in Ehlers and Necas that the Sens have some degree of interest in. They know they might not have to or be able to keep Chychrun, get something good in return. To me, this makes sense for everybody. But let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe. Stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.